Welcome to When One Thing Leads to Another, a podcast that takes you freewheeling down the great internet rabbit hole of trivia.
Each week we pick a starting point, and then who knows where all the twists, turns and tangents will take us. But we'll be sure to unearth a treasure trove of frivolous facts that will be as fascinating as they are, well, useless.
When One Thing Leads to Another is produced and presented by us, Helen and Bill Rich. Our theme music is by Justin Mitchell.
This is episode 5, Sheds. Now, I have been very pleased with myself these last couple of days because I have successfully, and may I say rather skillfully, built a garden shed.
You have indeed. Very surprised.
No one is more surprised than me because my DIY ventures usually end badly. But anyway, this got me thinking about sheds. And so I have been doing a spot of research and have found some interesting facts about sheds.
Wow, you do surprise me.
Yeah. Now, did you know that sheds have been used by a number of notable authors to do their writing in?
Oh, yes.
I'll give you a list, shall I?
Yeah.
Roald Dahl.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Roald Dahl, he had a writing shed.
Yeah.
Virginia Woolf.
Oh.
Louis de Bernier.
Ooh.
And George Bernard Shaw.
Oh, yes, yeah, okay.
Now, George Bernard Shaw had an interesting shed because it was a modest little 6 by 6 foot shed, but he pimped it by having it built on a revolving base.
Right, why?
So he could follow the sun around his little garden.
What a brilliant idea.
It is a brilliant idea.
Why do we have sheds like that now? That's a great idea.
No, given how old that was, that's some advanced technology there. And so he could follow the sun round, and so that would maximise light. And also, it would vary his view.
Yeah, wow, that's a great idea.
It is a great idea. And what else is interesting is he called his shed London.
Right.
Now, why would he call his shed London?
Tell me.
I'll tell you, shall I? When he didn't want to be disturbed from his writing, he'd get his staff to tell any callers that Mr. Shaw wasn't available because he was in London.
Oh, very droll.
And you can visit his shed because the National Trust owns it, and it's in Hertfordshire.
Oh.
So get along and see it if you like. It's a very nice house, actually, and lovely gardens.
Oh, I'm sure it is. We should go.
Yeah, and I'll tell you someone who did go.
Who?
In 1944, the actress Vivien Leigh.
Oh, Vivien Leigh.
Vivien Leigh, no less, visited Shaw at his shed because she was appearing in a film based on Shaw's book, Caesar and Cleopatra. And a photograph exists of that encounter on internet.
Oh, Vivien Leigh.
Vivien Leigh.
Well, I've got some facts about Vivien Leigh, actually.
Hit me.
Well, of course, she is most famously known for Gone with the Wind. Would you say that's true?
I would say that holds up, yeah.
Well, did you know that her filming schedule was pretty gruelling?
Right.
She worked up to 16-hour days, 6 days a week,
Ooh.
for 125 days.
Okay, that is brutal.
Yeah, to deal with the stress of filming, she supposedly smoked 4 packets of cigarettes a day, which is some going, and I've worked out that let's say the 16-hour days that she's awake.
Oh, you've done some maths.
That works out as 1 ciggy every 12 minutes.
Whoa, that's some
full 16-hour days.
That is some smoking.
Apparently, she was paid $25,000 for the film, while Clark Gable, who worked far less, only 71 days, I read, he was paid $120,000, which is nearly 5 times as much as Vivien.
Flipping heck.
So the gender pay gap was in full effect back in 1939.
Wasn't it just?
And also, this is my final bit on Vivien Leigh, she let it be known that she didn't much like kissing Clark Gable in the love scenes,
right,
describing it as a chore because she said that Gable's breath was a bit lively.
Oh!
Well, you know why his breath was a bit lively?
He refused to brush his teeth or something.
He had pyorrhea.
Pyorrhea?
Which is essentially gum disease.
So sort of like diarrhea of the teeth.
Yeah.
Okay, just going back to George Bernard Shaw, he famously wrote Pygmalion.
He did.
You will recall, which was turned into a film. They renamed it My Fair Lady.
They did.
Starring
Don't tell. It's Audrey Hepburn.
Audrey Hepburn is correctamundo. However, prior to that, it was a West End show.
Yeah.
And it starred no less than Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison.
Rex Harrison.
So I was doing a little bit of research on Julie Andrews, and you know, of course, she was the star of The Sound of Music.
She was indeed.
Of course she was. And I saw an interview that she gave about the famous scene in The Sound of Music, you know, where she's up in the hills there.
The hills are alive with the sound of music. Ah.
That very one. Okay, well, if you remember that scene, they shot that from a helicopter.
Okay.
So you see this beautiful wide is it Austria or Switzerland?
Well, I mean, it's Salzburg, isn't it?
Is it? Anyway, when they were filming that scene,
yes,
they were filming it from a helicopter.
Yeah.
And the thing was, they had to have a load of takes because the helicopter has to get quite close, and it just the downdraft just blew her over.
Oh, wow, actually blew her over. Well, she was a little slight thing, wasn't she?
I just wish there was outtakes on the internet, but I couldn't find any. Now, she also took the lead role in, famously,
Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins, of course.
Mary Poppins.
And that is a film that you enjoy greatly.
Yes, and everybody else.
In the world.
Who has a soul and a heart.
Well, you know the song A Spoonful of Sugar.
I do.
A spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
No,
the medicine go down.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Oh, how's it go?
For a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down.
You're very good at that. Now, you'll recall that Mary Poppins sings that song when she's trying to coerce the two kids into carrying out some household chores.
Yes.
And do you remember when she bursts into song and then a robin,
I do.
a slightly crappy animatronic robin comes to the window and whistles with her?
Oh.
Not only is Mary Poppins Julie Andrews singing, she's also providing the whistle of that bird.
Is she?
Yeah, that's her whistling.
That does surprise me.
Yeah, so not only is she a great singer, she's a pretty useful whistler. And that led me to remember that once I met a world champion whistler.
I know, because when you moved in with me all those many years ago...
Well, when we were young and in love.
When we were young and in love in the good old days. I remember your box of CDs that were about to be put onto the CD cabinet. And I remember coming across a CD of the world champion whistler.
Yeah.
And thinking, oh, what have I done? Do I really know this person that I'm moving in with? He's got a whistling CD.
Before you pass judgment, maybe you want to chuck that CD on and then let's hear your opinion, yeah? Well, yes. Well, I met the bloke, and the bloke was called David Morris. And he's an outstanding whistler, and he won the World Whistling Championships in 2003. Anyway, I had the pleasure of meeting him once. Anyway, I thought I'd show off and give him a burst of my own whistling skills.
Oh yeah, what did you whistle?
I gave him Looney Tunes.
Go on then. Wow, pick a key, any key.
Not bad, but he, in a sort of, you know, you have a rap battles.
Yes.
Well, he sort of had a rap battle in whistle form, and he blew me away with his amazing version of Flight of the Bumblebee.
Oh wow, okay.
And I have found a clip of David Morris performing that, and we're going to listen to it now.
Wow, that's pretty good. That is not an easy one to whistle.
It's not bad at all. Anyway, it amused me. You know how when you're on YouTube and you watch a video and then a list of other videos come up that relate to the one you've just watched?
Yeah.
So I was amused to see that another video popped up from a guy called Yuki Takeda. And he described himself as a multilingual whistler. And I think he sort of slightly set himself up as a competitor to David Morris. And he's got a version of Flight of the Bumblebee, which sounds like this. Yeah, and what really made me laugh about this is there's a comment under the video, you know how there is on YouTube,
yes.
And it's from someone calling themselves Bark Pfeiffer, and he writes, and I quote, "You missed 5 notes." I had the sheet music in front of me while I was listening.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, wow.
Too much time on his hands.
Too much time in his hands. However, he then does a bit of a turnaround. He says, actually, very, very nice. Your arrangement of this very difficult piece was executed to great effect and was very enjoyable. Keep up the good work, Yuki.
Okay, so while you were playing that fantastic version of Flight of the Bumblebee, I was looking up bumblebees.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Did you know that there are 300 different species of bumblebee?
300 species of just bumblebee?
Just bumblebee.
Right.
And over 2,500 species of bee.
Good grief.
And you know, if a bee stings you, it dies.
I've had the yes,
yeah, sadly.
yes.
Not so with the bumblebee.
Right, what? Yeah.
Their stinger isn't barbed, so it doesn't get left in the skin of the victim, so it doesn't die.
Oh.
Another thing a bumblebee doesn't do, it doesn't make honey.
What a lazy.
Yeah, they're maverick bees. They don't
conform.
fly with the swarm. Yeah. So and apparently a bumblebee with a full stomach is only ever about 40 minutes from starvation. That's a bit like you.
Oh, I see. So the old bumbler's got to just keep going. Got to keep flying around and just got to keep
finding
tucking
food.
In. Wow. Okay.
And that little bit of information comes from Dave Goulson, who is a scientist who founded a conservation trust to support bumblebee populations.
Nice one, Dave.
I like a bumblebee.
Well, we need to look after the bees, don't we?
And that then led me on to famous beekeepers. Do you know any famous beekeepers?
Famous beekeepers.
I mean, we have our good friends Ron and Will. They keep bees, don't they?
They keep bees, yeah.
Aristotle studied bees and kept them in primitive hives.
Oh.
But I'm reading here that he wasn't exactly accurate with a lot of his findings, calling queen bees kings. Fortunately,
basic Aristotle, basic.
Fortunately for him, he was better at philosophising than beekeeping. Another famous beekeeper.
Go on.
Sir Edmund Hillary.
Oh, yeah. He was up Everest the first.
Yeah, and he worked for his dad's beekeeping business, which was a seasonal occupation that allowed him to fund his climbing ambitions during the Northern Hemisphere's summer.
Oh, well, that's very useful for Sir Edmund Hillary.
And actually, going back to The Sound of Music...
Go on.
The real Maria von Trapp...
Yeah, go on.
...became a beekeeper.
She was a beekeeper.
After she fled the Nazis and resettled in Vermont in USA. She became a beekeeper.
Well, how about that?
And also, Sylvia Plath took up beekeeping in 1962.
Oh, yeah.
Inspired by her late father, who was a bee aficionado. And she wrote a series of 5 bee-based poems. Would you like to hear a little bit of one?
Give us an excerpt.
This is from her poem, The Bee Meeting.
Please.
You ready?
Yeah.
I am nude as a chicken neck. Does nobody love me? Yes. Here is the Secretary of Bees with her white shop smock, buttoning the cuffs at my wrists and the slit from my neck to my knees. Now I am milkweed silk. The bees will not notice. They will not smell my fear, my fear, my fear.
Oh,
I don't know if I've given that justice.
I thought you. I was right there.
And lastly, Henry Fonda kept bees.
Oh, okay.
And thought very highly of the honey they produced. He said, "There's not a honey on the market like mine."
Oh.
Yeah, he boasted in the New York Times, like it was him that made the honey, not the bees.
Okay, talking of Henry Fonda.
Yeah.
Famous kids, of course.
Yeah.
Jane Fonda.
Yeah.
And Peter Fonda.
Yeah.
I found a very interesting fact about Peter Fonda.
Okay.
Which will possibly amaze you. I don't know. Let's see.
Right.
Do you know the song She Said, She Said by the Beatles?
She said, I know what it's like to be dead. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. From the album Revolver. And the lyric goes, as you say, she said, I know what it's like to be dead. Now that was written by John Lennon after he'd had an encounter with Peter Fonda.
Oh.
Here's the story. The Beatles were staying in a big old mansion in Hollywood. They were resting after their US tour. It was the US tour where they famously played the Shea Stadium.
Oh, yeah.
And they hosted a party for Roger McGuinn and David Crosby of the Byrds.
Yeah.
And there was a load of other people there. It was famous. I think Joan Baez is listed as going. And Peter Fonda. And being the 60s, man, they were all dropping acid. Not all of them, I'm sure. All right, just a little disclaimer there. There was a certain amount of LSD being dropped, shall we say. And anyway, Peter Fonda supposedly, according to John Lennon's memoirs, was going around recalling when, as a kid, he accidentally shot himself.
He accidentally shot himself?
He accidentally shot himself and effectively sort of shot himself dead, and he was brought back to life in an operating theatre.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and so he was going around telling people, I know what it's like to be dead.
Oh, wow, and that's where the lyric came from.
So John Lennon took that lyric and
changed it to she.
He changed it to she rather than he.
But is that a slight bummer at a party to be going around telling everyone, I know what it's like to be dead? Oh, good for you, Peter.
Well, it's so funny you should say that, because John Lennon also in his memoirs was saying that, yeah, he was slightly bumming people out.
Oh, yeah, people especially if you're on acid.
People are tripping, trying to have a nice time, and there's Peter Fonda being all a bit morbid, saying, oh, I know what it's like, a bit slightly creepy. Yeah. John Lennon had to ask him to leave.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, apparently so. And I also found out at this very party, Roger McGuinn and David Crosby recommended the music of Ravi Shankar to George. Oh. To George. And George digged the groove, and he actually arranged to go over to India to learn how to play sitar from the master, Ravi Shankar, no less.
So that all started with Roger McGuinn and...
That all started with Roger McGuinn, the whole Ravi Shankar thing. Anyway, when George was going over to India to learn the sitar, Ravi said, listen, do you mind coming in disguise? Because we just don't need any unnecessary attention.
Yeah.
So George grew his tash.
Right.
Which is quite a famous tash now.
Yeah.
We quite often think of George with his tash, but he grew that tash and grew his hair or styled his hair differently in order to remain incognito. And apparently he got all the way through customs and passport control and all the rest of it. And it was only at the hotel in Bombay where he was spotted by a bellboy, who then the word got out, crowds started to gather. So George and Ravi had to get the hell out of Dodge, and they did their sitar lessons on a houseboat.
Oh, how nice.
Which I thought was interesting. And so then I started to look at old Ravi Shankar, and...
You see, it's not Ravi Shankar. That sounds like Cockney rhyming slang.
Another interesting thing about Ravi Shankar was when Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in 1948, the national radio wanted to play mournful music, and so they got Ravi to play on the so he composed this piece, which then many years later featured in the film Gandhi.
Oh, right. Well, speaking of the film Gandhi,
yes,
actually, did you know Ben Kingsley?
Of course,
played Gandhi.
Yeah, he won the Oscar for it, I think.
Yeah, I think he did. Well, did you know that he was born Krishna Pandit Banji, Ben Kingsley?
Oh, okay, right.
His he had an English mum and an Indian dad.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's interesting, because I've always thought it was a bit controversial that that
a white guy
playing but he
Gandhi.
was
He's half Indian.
Half Indian, so it was only half racist then.
And staying on the subject of Ben Kingsley.
Yeah.
Did you know his first screen appearance was in Coronation Street?
Coronation Street?
He played the part of Ron Jenkins for a couple of years in 1966.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and that brings me on to other surprising Coronation Street acting parts.
Yeah, go on.
Honor Blackman.
Okay, wow. Okay, yeah. She was Pussy Galore, wasn't she?
She was Pussy Galore
in one of the Bond films.
Yeah, she also played the mother in The Upper Hand, the Joe McGann comedy show that I used to love. Ian McKellen.
Wow, Sir Ian McKellen Gandalf guy.
Yeah, Peter Kay.
Really, he was in Coronation Street.
In Coronation Street,
right?
And Joan Collins.
Joan Collins.
Yes, although she played herself.
Okay.
In the 1997 feature-length Viva Las Vegas episode, where she was on a plane with Jack and Vera Duckworth, who travelled to Las Vegas to renew their wedding vows.
Good grief.
I think I remember that. There's a scene on an aeroplane where Joan walks past Vera so briskly that Vera spills a drink all over herself, and Joan says, "Don't worry, it'll wash out. I should know." Which is a nod to her Cinzano adverts.
Yeah, okay, the Cinzano
with Leonard Rossiter.
Leonard Rossiter. Oh, yeah, those are... Yeah, we're old enough to remember those, yeah.
Oh, can't you just smell those Italian wines, suffused with herbs and spices from 4 continents? I'm being boring. Oh, sorry. Sorry. Getting your head down, sweetie. Jolly good idea.
From the house of Cinzano, Cinzano Bianco.
Oh yeah, the funny thing about Cinzano is I think every household in the 70s and 80s had a bottle of Cinzano, right? We certainly
probably,
did.
right.
Where you'd sort of dust it off every Christmas. My dad would have a Cinzano and lemonade because I think he thought it was a bit sophisticated. And he'd probably have one, and then it would just go back in the back of the cupboard along with the old Warnings Avocat.
Cinzano was one of the first things I got drunk on at university.
Congratulations.
One of those drinks that you get drunk on it when you're about 18 and then you can't even smell it for the rest of your life because it makes you dry heave.
Okay, we're just going to back up.
Okay.
Right, we're going to back up. Do you remember we were talking right at the beginning about George Bernard Shaw?
Yeah.
He had a shed, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And then Vivian Leigh came to visit him at
Yeah.
his shed, and then she co-starred with Clark Gable in Gone with the Wind.
Yeah.
Well, I have found another killer fact about Clark Gable, which I'd wish to share with you.
Oh, please
right,
do.
now, in the film It Happened One Night, Clark Gable's character is seen leaning against a fence and he's just munching on a raw carrot.
Oh.
Okay. Now, a guy by the name of Frizz Frelling. Now, does that ring any bells?
Frizz Frelling?
Yeah, a bloke called Frizz Frelling.
No.
No, he saw the film, right? And he had created the character Bugs Bunny. And he saw this scene and he thought, that would be brilliant for my character Bugs Bunny.
What, to munch on carrots?
On a carrot. Apparently, in the wild, rabbits wouldn't necessarily eat carrots. And that's a bit of a myth that has been created through the Bugs Bunny cartoons. So the whole Bugs Bunny carrot crunching shtick comes from Clark Gable.
And that's the end.
Thank you for listening to When One Thing Leads to Another, a podcast produced and presented by us, Helen and Bill Rich.
If you've enjoyed this episode, then please rate and review us on wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to subscribe, and that way you'll never miss an episode.
We'd also love to hear from you, especially if we've got any of our information wrong, or you have some more fascinating facts about something we've talked about, or you could even suggest a subject for our starting point.
Our email address is whenonethingleads@gmail.com.
A massive thank you to Justin Mitchell for letting us use his music as our theme song. It's a track called Homo Erectus, taken from his fantastical album called The Garden of Earthly Delights, which is available to buy from bandcamp.com.
Thanks also to Acast for hosting us.
Join us next week for another episode of When One Thing Leads to Another.
Please note that all facts have been found on the internet and therefore we cannot vouch for their veracity.